Good morning, everyone. I'm Doug Aguilera, and this is the March 20th, 2025 Committee on Professional Conduct Committee meeting. The CBA has provided the opportunity to the public to participate via WebEx platform. When we take public comments, we will begin by taking public comment from those individuals attending the meeting at the Sacramento location. I will then ask the moderator to open up the lines for public comment. You will be allocated up to 5 minutes for public comment. Turn the meeting over, and now I will turn the meeting over to Ms. Reed to establish a quorum. Thank you.
Doug Aguilera.
Present.
Nancy Corrigan.
Nancy Corrigan, present.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Present.
Christian Lotta. Tony Lynn.
Yeah.
Yin Tu.
Here.
And Evangeline Ward.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. The CBA's mission is to protect consumers by ensuring only qualified licensees practice public accountancy in accordance with established professional standards. This mission is derived from the statutory requirement that protection of the public shall be the highest priority for the California Board of Accountancy in exercising its licensing, regulatory, and disciplinary functions. Whenever the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. Our first agenda item is number 1, public comments for items not on the agenda. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda? Here in Sacramento? Seeing none. Moderator, can you open up the lines to see if there are any public comments for items not on the agenda?
Absolutely. We are now taking public comment via WebEx for items not on the agenda. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand. And for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ellipses button, that's the ... and cycle through the 3 different pages in order to find your hand. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the agenda?
Please, thank you. The next item is number 2, approval of the minutes of the January 23rd, 2025 Committee on Professional Conduct meeting. Get a motion to accept the minutes of the January 23rd, 2025 meeting. Thank you, Ms. Hines. And a second.
Seconded by Yin Tu.
Thank you. Are there any comments from the committee? Any comments from the public here in Sacramento?
Mr. Chair, Michael Connotes, legal counsel. Because there's no one on the WebEx, we're going to dispense with checking with WebEx, and we have someone monitoring in case a member of the public comes in. So we can dispense with that for now.
Fantastic. Thank you. Seeing no comments here, no one on WebEx. Ms. Reed, can you help us with the vote?
Doug Aguilera.
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan.
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Christian Lotta. Tony Lynn.
Yes.
Yin Tu.
Yes.
Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the review and possible approval of policy direction regarding requirements for retired status. And Ms. Benedict is here to walk us through that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Aguilera. I am Sarah Benedict, and I am the manager of the License Renewal and Continuing Competency Unit. The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CPC and CBA with an opportunity to discuss and possibly approve a policy change for incorporation into a future rulemaking package related to the CBA's retired status requirement. Business and Professions Code Section 5070.1 establishes a retired status for CPAs or PAs licensed with the CBA and directs the CBA to establish minimum qualifications to place a license in retired status. At its May 2011 meeting, the CBA discussed the minimum qualifications for the retired status. Staff recommended a minimum of 20 years of licensure as a CPA or PA with at least 5 years in an active status with the CBA. The CBA agreed with the staff recommendation, and those requirements are in regulation. A licensee in retired status does not have practice rights and does not need to pay a renewal fee to maintain the retired status. A person in retired status can convert to active by completing CE and paying a fee, but they can only go into retired status twice in their lifetime. Prior to the establishment of the retired status, licensees who left public accounting either continued to pay the renewal fee to renew inactive, or they allowed their license to go into delinquent status, ultimately canceling the license after 5 years of non-renewal. The retired status provides licensee with a status that accurately represents their current place in public accounting. Since the implementation of the retired status in 2014, staff has received frequent feedback from licensees requesting the CBA consider removing the 5 years of active status requirement. Renewal unit staff report that the most common reason a licensee does not meet the retired status requirements is because they have not had an active license in California for 5 years. Staff recommends removing the 5-year active requirement as it does not contribute to consumer protection and may be perceived as an arbitrary barrier to licensees who wish to be placed in retired status. That concludes my presentation on this item. I will now turn it back over to Chair Aguilera, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Ms. Benedict. Are there any questions from the committee? Yes, great, thanks.
So I had a question about whether California licensed accountant that is not living in California, but maybe is also licensed in another jurisdiction and practicing in another jurisdiction, would there be a situation where they might want to retire their California license, but keep their license in their other jurisdiction?
Yes, they can do that.
All right. Okay. So the retired status in California would mean that California is not paying attention to what's happening to them in their other jurisdiction. Is that right? Or could they be using their license from another jurisdiction to then represent clients in California with that retired license status?
We do pay attention. They don't have to pay a renewal fee, but they do actually have to do a renewal form every year. So we're still asking them the conviction question. And then I think there's some reciprocity in the enforcement where they tell us if somebody gets, just say, sorry, I'm not, it's been a long time since I've been in enforcement, but I'm pretty sure we get notified if somebody gets in trouble in another state. So we do kind of keep track of them. They could, in theory, use a license from another state under the practice privilege here in California. I don't know that that's happening. I certainly have not heard of it happening. Usually, it's very rare to hear of someone who wants to keep a license in another state and retire here. Most of the people that we're dealing with are truly retiring and want to use the status.
Thank you. And Ms. Benedict actually hit the part about the mobility. Yes, that can happen. And I think it's probably, I'm not saying it's frequent, but it's probably a more common occurrence in today's environment because a lot of people used to have 5, 6, 7, 8 licenses prior to mobility. So individuals don't want to try to keep 7 or 8, 9 licenses going. So they'll oftentimes now, if a state offers that retired status, move it into retired status and then continue to operate under their other license. They obviously can't do everything under mobility potentially, but the majority of stuff they might continue to be able to do.
Seems to me that the 5 years active is an extra unnecessary requirement that's creating some friction in the system and extra work for staff when it's just not necessary. Would you like us to take a motion on this recommendation, or do you just want our verbal feedback?
I think we're just looking for verbal feedback at this point. No, we're taking a motion? Okay.
Okay. Can I get a motion to follow the recommendation that, which is to remove the 5-year active requirement for retired status for inclusion in future rulemaking, in a future rulemaking package? Thank you, Ms. Carey.
Yes, I move that we adopt a staff recommendation. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Tu.
I will make a second to that motion.
Or any comments? Yes, thank. Mr. Lin. Mr. Lin, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to show the support uh, from the document presented. I would like to commend that the staff for their excellent job working in prepare the document. From the report highlighted that the most frequent issue when the licensee fail to meet the renewal requirement is not to meet the 5 years active status in California. This provides concrete evidence that the rule is a barrier for licensee. The recommendation from the staff to remove the requirement is supported by the argument that it doesn't contribute to the consumer protection. This makes sense because the purpose of the retirement status is generally to allow professionals who are no longer actively maintaining their credential without needing to fulfill continuing requirements that don't directly related to the consumer protection. The suggestion that the 5 years active status requirement could be perceived as an arbitrary barrier also seem valid. If the rule doesn't directly improve consumer protection to ensure competency, it could be seen as an unnecessary hurdle to the professional seeking retired status. What the chair, I will echo with the chair, what it is unnecessarily active for the 5 years. So I will, this is my point of view to support the removing the 5 years retirement status. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lin. Are there any more comments from the committee? Are there any comments here? Sacramento? Seeing none, moderator, will you open up the lines for comment on this recommendation that we're adopting?
We are open for public comment on the motion. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Thank you. Ms. Reed, will you take a vote?
Evangeline Ward, Yen Tu,
Yes.
Tony Lin,
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Carrie Ann Farrell Hines,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan,
Yes.
and Doug Aguilera,
Yes.
and the motion carries.
The next item on our agenda is number 4, review and possible approval of the policy direction regarding acceptable continuing education courses and subject areas. Ms. Benedict, please continue.
The purpose of this agenda item is to provide the CPC and the CBA with an opportunity to discuss and possibly approve a change in policy related to CE subject areas for inclusion in a future rulemaking package. At the March 2024 CBA meeting, former CBA President Joseph Rosenbaum appointed CBA members Doug Aguilera, CPA, and Patricia Batchelor, CPA, to work closely with staff as a CE work group to develop proposals and ideas for CBA consideration. I'm going to refer to the CE work group as the work group going forward. The work group met on 3 occasions and discussed various CE regulation topics. Each of the topics will be brought to the CBA for discussion, culminating in an agenda item for consideration to initiate a rulemaking. Since the mid-1970s, the CBA has required licensees renewing their license in an active status to complete CE. The CE requirements are listed on page 1 of the agenda item. Licensees may be subject to work-specific CE requirements depending on what type of work they performed in the 2 years prior to their renewal. For example, a licensee who performed accounting and auditing work, which is commonly referred to as A&A, must complete 24 hours of CE that focuses on A&A and 4 hours of fraud CE that is related to the prevention, detection, and/or reporting of fraud affecting financial statements. The full list of work-specific CE starts at the end of page 1 and continues on to page 2. The work-specific CE requirements focus on a specific area of risk to consumers. However, coupled with the ethics, regulatory review, and 2012 requirement, they create complexity in the CBA's CE requirements. California Code of Regulations Section 87 defines acceptable subject areas for the following CE requirements: technical, non-technical, ethics, governmental accounting, A&A, preparation engagements, and fraud. The work group discussed the various subject areas and recommended minimal changes, which I will go over in my presentation. I'm going to start with governmental auditing. The generally accepted governmental auditing standards, also known as GAGAS or the Yellow Book, are professional standards that require licensees engaging in audits of a government program to complete 24 hours of CE every 2 years in a subject matter directly related to the government environment, government auditing, or the specific and unique environment in which the audited entity operates. GAGAS also requires an additional 56 hours in a subject matter that directly enhances auditors' professional expertise to conduct engagements. California licensees are required by law to abide by all professional standards. Staff researched other state boards of accountancy license renewal laws and regulations and found that only 2 other states, Florida and Oregon, require governmental auditing CE. The work group did not express a strong opinion on keeping or removing the governmental auditing CE requirement. However, staff are recommending that the CBA remove the requirement as it appears duplicative of the GAGAS requirement, apart from the fraud CE requirement. GAGAS does not require any fraud CE, while the CBA requires 4 hours of fraud CE for any licensee engaging in any kind of a test engagement, including governmental auditing. If the CBA removed the 24-hour governmental auditing CE requirement, licensees engaging in government audits would still be subject to the CBA's general A&A and fraud CE requirement. Governmental auditing courses satisfy the general AACE requirement, making the 4 hours of fraud the only additional CE that would be required by the CBA. Okay, I'm going to move on to non-technical. Licensees may satisfy the CE requirement by taking up to 40 hours of CE in non-technical subject matters, such as those listed on page 4. Non-technical CE must directly contribute to the professional competency of a licensee. Subjects that are not specifically work-related, such as personal growth or spirituality, are not acceptable as CE. The work group agreed with staff's recommendation to expand non-technical CE to include trainings commonly required in the workplace, such as sexual harassment and workplace violence prevention, stress management, and employee wellness, and to include world languages, as communicating with customers may directly contribute to professional competency. Please note that the item uses the phrase stress management, but staff are recommending replacing the phrase workplace stress management, replacing the phrase with workplace stress management to emphasize that connection to professional competence. Okay, the next topic is specialized industry knowledge. Current regulations use the term specialized industry as an example of technical CE subject, and industry accounting as an example of a subject that would count towards the A&A requirement. The work group discussed the subject area of industry accounting and how the term did not accurately convey the CE that a licensee may take. The work group recommended renaming industry accounting to specialized industry knowledge to provide clarity and to align with the NASBA field of study document. Staff recommend renaming the subject area of specialized industry, which is believed to be the same thing as industry accounting, to specialized industry knowledge for consistency. And the last policy change the CBA may wish to consider is regarding the fraud CE requirement. As I mentioned earlier, licensees who have engaged in a test work must complete 4 hours of fraud CE. In practice, the CBA will accept any excess fraud hours as A&A, although this is not stated in the CE regulations. For example, if a licensee had 6 hours of fraud CE, the CBA would allow the licensee to use 2 of those fraud hours as A&A instead of fraud. The work group agreed with staff that the regulation should state that excess fraud courses may be used as A&A. That concludes the recommended policy changes to the CE subject areas. In summary, the recommended changes are to remove the 24 hours of governmental auditing CE requirement, but continue to require licensees performing work under GAGAS to complete 4 hours of fraud CE. Amend the non-technical CE subject area to allow sexual harassment and workplace violence training, workplace stress management, employee wellness, and world languages to count towards non-technical CE. Rename the specialized industry and accounting industry subject areas to specialized industry knowledge, and allow excess fraud hours to count towards this ANA CE requirement. And that concludes my presentation. I will now turn it back over to Chair Aguilera, and I'm happy to answer any member questions.
Thank you, Ms. Benedict. Quite a big bite here all at once, but very, very, very efficient. And again, this is for a rulemaking package in the future. It shows that you and the team are very proactive and looking for ways to make the process simpler for the licensees. And I know that's appreciated. So I'm just going to summarize a little bit here that there's a duplicative government auditing CE required if you're doing a government audit or a yellow book audit. And it's already a requirement to have sufficient training under a different organization's requirements. Is that right? Professional standards.
Correct.
And so if we just lean on our requirement that licensees follow professional standards, then it's covered. So we don't also have to have it in our list of required CE.
Correct.
So that's duplicative. And then by opening up the non-technical subjects that are available for CE by allowing sexual harassment and workplace violence prevention and stress management, employee wellness, and the other, and world languages, which I like, then it becomes maybe a little bit easier for the licensees to complete their non-technical hours. And in a way, it helps us to guide them towards what we'd like them to be focused on. The renaming of specialized industry and industry accounting to specialized industry knowledge seems pretty straightforward, just consistently. And then allowing the excess fraud hours to count towards A&E seems to make sense to me. That's what's happening already. And now you just want to codify it.
Yes.
Okay. You have a recommendation here on page 6, and it doesn't have the excess fraud hours. It has those items, but it doesn't say in here, I don't think, that it doesn't include this recommendation, which will turn into a motion, doesn't say anything about allowing the excess fraud hours to count towards A&E CE requirement. I'm sorry to bring this up so late.
That was probably an oversight. We would like that to be included.
Okay. So committee, on page 6 of the package prepared for today is a recommendation that covers all of these suggested enhancements and needs to add excess fraud hours to count towards A&E CE requirement. Is there a brave individual that would like to put forth a motion that summarizes all of this?
Mr. Chair, members, I think a good way to make this motion will be to move the staff recommendation with the addition of the description that you gave so eloquently better than I would.
I knew that my esteemed colleagues would do that. Ms. Tu, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I would be happy to move staff's recommendation.
Corrigan.
And I second that motion. I also want to thank Ms. Benedict for her excellent presentations today. Thank you.
Yep. And Ms. Tu, your motion includes the excess fraud hours. Any comments from the committee? Yes, thanks.
Thank
Ms.
you,
Long.
Chair Aguilera. I had a few comments in regards to the non-technical subjects. I see that the personal growth isn't included, and I would argue that some personal growth relates directly to professional development, things like enhancing productivity or time management types of subjects. Are those already included in the other non-technical areas listed? I didn't see like an explicit link to that, so I was just curious.
They are not. And the guideline, the CE regulations are examples of things. So when staff are reviewing renewal applications, we are looking at courses on an individual basis. So if someone were to claim a course such as time management in the workplace or personal growth as an employee or something that was like specifically related to work, then we would accept that, even if it's not specifically listed in the regulations. What we're trying to get away from is like things that just make you a better person in life, but don't necessarily correspond to working in like the professional environment.
And I had some additional comments. Thank you. Also for GAGA's requirement, their standard is the 24 hours. So we would just be removing an additional 24 hours on top of that. Is that correct?
They don't need to take an additional 24 hours. They are already taking the 24 hours for GAGAS, and they're probably just reporting the CE that they're taking for GAGAS on their renewal application. So we're just removing that from our requirements so that staff don't necessarily need to monitor that because it's already being required as a professional standard.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other comments from the committee? Are there any public comments here in Sacramento?
Good morning, Jason Fox with the California Society of CPAs. Just a couple comments. No issues on the broadening of the non-technical components. That certainly aligns with how we've approached our view of continuing education and a well-rounded professional. So I think that's okay. No issues on the technical cleanup provisions and the clarification around the fraud use of extra credits. We are looking a little bit closer at the governmental piece just to make sure there's no gaps, nothing that we're missing, and kind of want to do an extra kind of practitioner perspective of the alignment between the yellow book requirements and the licensure requirements. We certainly see the board staff's point where there can create confusion if those two don't line up perfectly from a licensure and from a engagement standpoint, but it's one of the flag that we're looking at it a little bit closer just to make sure there's issues from our side, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fox. Are there any other public comments here in Sacramento? Seeing none, moderator, will you open up the lines for public comment on this item?
There are no members of the public online.
Thank you. Ms. Reed, can you help us with the vote?
Aguilera,
Yes.
Nancy Corrigan, Yes. Carrie Ann Farrell Hines.
Yes.
Christian Lotta,
Yes.
Tony Lynn,
Yes.
Yen Tu,
Yes.
and Evangeline Ward.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of this meeting. We are now adjourned.